Hey, y'all. I was in office hours the other day and someone asked me about ERDs, entity relationship diagrams. And I was like, oh, use this app, use this website, DB diagram. And then we were looking at it together and I was like, oh man, this is not very intuitive. So I spent a few minutes and I talked to another student who uses it. And now I'm ready to, lay it down for you. Okay, here we go. dbdiagram.io. If you go to dbdiagram.io and you have not signed up, then it'll tell you or ask you to sign up, but you don't have to pay for it. You can see my upgrade button here. I'm not paying for this. All right. I think when you go, you have some options. It may start off with like new sample or something. And this is like, oh, this is really complicated. And so what I did was, well, first I went to new diagram and I was like, oh, well, this is totally intimidating because I don't know what to do. And then I went to sample, and then I went to no, not sample. There's like a sample Airbnb somewhere. Shoot, now I've lost it. Where is my workspaces? How about that? Did you copy? Well, I can't remember how I got there. But anyways, if I teach you this, maybe you won't need it. The point is that these tables can be built very easily. So basically, if you have the form table, capital T table, name of the table, which is pluralized, then you have the name of the column or the attribute, and then you have the type. And this bracket primary key, just generates the bold here. But other than that, you don't really have to do a lot more. And you can do these connections in other ways. So let me do a new one from scratch. Let's see if I can do it. Table users, and I've got ID integer, and I've got name string, and I've got username string, and I've got password digest, because this is going to be has secure password. That's good enough for now. Okay. So this is also from talking to a student. They were talking about a book group. So I'm just going to take their idea. Table, books. Okay, so the book has a title. The title will have a string, and the what else? It'll have an author, which will be a string, and maybe a rating or something, which would be an integer. All right, and then there's going to be groups. Okay, so groups, boom. And this is, I can kind of drag this around to different places. And groups are going to have a name, which will be a string, and a date, which would be, or like a meeting, which would be like date time, and a how often, so that's like a repeat, and then it'll just be a string. Okay, so now I need to kind of figure out what's the relationship here. So a user is going to belong to a group. I guess a user could be in many groups. Yeah, so then I'm going to make a join table called user groups, table user groups. And wait a minute, it's grouching about something. Expected comment, valid name, white space, oh, maybe I just need to put something in here. User group will have a name. No, it'll just have a user ID, which is an integer, and it'll have a group ID, which is an integer. And now I can start making my connections here, because let's get to the book later. I could have the user ID connect to the ID here. And I could have the group ID. Oh, I forgot to put that in there. In fact, I forget to do that for all of them. ID integer, ID integer. So then this guy's going over here. No, crap, not that way. This way. That way. And then one of the requirements is that the user group or the joins table has to have a submittable attribute. That's one of the requirements of the phase 4 project. I actually think there's another joins table here because the groups could be reading, like belong to a group, but then we could read many books. And so, and that's not unique to a particular group. So I guess I would do another join table called a book groups, and that would have, did everybody have an ID? Oh, this also has an ID integer. And so I have my ID integer here, and I'm going to have my group ID, which is an integer. And I'm going to have my book ID, which is an integer. And so then this guy goes in here. I got to kind of figure out how I'm going to do this so that I don't overtax myself. So the ID goes to the group ID, the book ID goes to the book ID, and then I got my little ERD set up. And going back to, well, let's call this the book group. Going back to the sample, my workspaces, I just want to see how they did. So they added square bracket primary key. Got some refs in here. Okay. So basically just the primary key is the thing that I'm missing, which is very easy to paste into all of them. So go back to my workspaces and go to my book group and go to here and just say primary key. Excuse me. And then basically I'll just copy this in each one. Each one has that as the primary key. Right. And now I've got myself a drawing of my entity relationship diagram. Now, just a quick point about this particular choice that I've made. This is more complicated than it needs to be for phase 4. And so, and I'm missing the part where I have to have a submittable attribute. So for instance, in book groups, I could look back at this and say, let me just have meeting be, let's have meeting day, and let's have that just be a string. And then the book group, the book groups can have a submittable attribute of a start date, which would be date. And then that fulfills the requirement that I have this submittable thing. Now, if I want a submittable attribute for the joins table, which is one of the requirements that it spells out in Canvas. Now, if I wanted to simplify this, I could probably have instead of a has many, which is ideal, like a user could belong to many groups. I could simplify that by just having it be a has one relationship and say, no, the user is going to have one group. So then the user will have a group ID that connects them to a group, and then they can have lots of books through that group. But you want to think carefully about that, because the more complicated you make your phase 4 project, the harder it is to actually accomplish it. And especially things like, you need to be able to read and create for all the models, can be challenging. An interesting question is, could this particular project be made to work with just users, groups, and books, with either groups or books as the joins table? It's a little tricky, because if I take out book groups and user groups and try to make groups the join table, how does that work? I have a user ID here. I have a book ID here. Sometimes the name doesn't really match. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. Oh, shoot. I can't do it that way. How about that? Bam. Bam. And then there's some lines here that don't make sense because I don't have any of these join tables anymore. Okay. So if I'm going back to this and I'm saying, okay, wait a minute. Let me imagine that the groups are the join tables. So then I have a user ID here, which is an integer, and I have a book ID here, which is an integer. So now the users have many books through groups, and a user can have many groups. Does it make sense? Could this work? I mean, what I just said sounds good, that I have many groups and that I have many books through the groups. I guess what's not accurate here from my perspective is that the group object only represents a connection between a user and a book. And so from that sense, I'm not going to be able to like say, hey, who's in this, who's in the, reading, how to be an anti-racist book group that meets on Tuesdays, because unless that has a common name that links them all together, it's going to be hard. There's going to be separate records for each user who happens to be in that group. So I don't know. I mean, I think it could work. And that definitely would be simpler. But sometimes I think the name of this, as you think about your models, can be misleading. Like, is it better to call this a user book and then have this be group name? So instead of calling this groups, I could say this is my user books, and this thing is my group name. Is that a better and more descriptive way of kind of thinking about what this represents? Or is it better to call it groups? I don't know. Some thoughts there. Definitely worth. I mean, this is a place where you have to spend time to get started in thinking about, what is my project going to look like? So don't like give this short shrift. You want to definitely dig into this, think about the different ways you could create it, talk to your instructor, talk to other students, go to office hours, talk about your ERD. But having a tool to lay out the picture, I think, is really helpful. All right, hope that helped. Oh man, I was like, oh my God, I recorded that whole thing and didn't share my screen. Okay, I think I shared it. So I'm gonna post this video. See ya.